actually am one of 8 living children from my mom and dad, who've now passed on to glory. And I was born in Guyana in South America.
Okay.
Was raised in a Christian home. Both mom and dad knew the Lord, but my dad never went to church, and he always said to us that he would never go back, set foot into another church because I don't know, he used to be a choir boy in the Anglican church, and I don't know, something must have happened. He never told us, but he never went to church in all the time that I knew my father. He never went to church. But
Wow.
I blessed my mother because she was the one who used to take us to church every Sunday,
Mhm.
and she was a Methodist, and so that was a great introduction to knowing the Lord. So basically, I always knew that there was a God, even though I didn't understand at the time much about it. So I went to a Methodist associated primary school, and from there to secondary school after the GCSE, after the, well, we call it common entrance in Guyana at that time. And,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
then from there, I went to secondary school where I did the GCSEs and started to work. So at 15, I joined the church, and we fasted and prayed for 1 month at a time. You know, we'd fast every day, but we'd break the fast in the evening. And this it was one of those churches that is very common in Africa and the Caribbean. So you know, you wore different colored clothes, you had your hair tied and all of that. But nevertheless, it gave me a foundation, and
Mhm.
they were very focused on the Old Testament. So so what are some of the significant events during this period of my life? Because I call this period from sunrise, birth to 15 years, so sunrise. So at about 3 years old, to my shock when I thought about it, I was taken from my family, from my mother and father and my brothers and sisters. My father decided in his wisdom at that time that I should go to live with my great aunt and my great uncle. She was married, but they had no children. They had no children together, although he had a son outside of the marriage before he met my great aunt. And so I was confused. I think I became a child who was very angry because, you know, at that age, you don't understand what's going on. I miss my sisters and my brothers. And I was just there. I was the only child in the house for a period of time. But my great aunt and my uncle were very nice people. And I loved my great aunt. She was, a great pillar for me. And she taught me how to cook even at that young age. And I suppose in somewhere in my mind, I was wondering why I was separated from my brothers and sisters, because you know children need to have their families around wherever possible. And 2 years later, he came back. I mean, they used to come and visit, yes, but 2 years later, he came back to say that he wanted me to go back home. And I was 5 then. My great aunt was, she asked me, did I want to stay with her or did I want to go home? And of course, at that age, you know, I want to be with my family. It was a very hard decision because I don't think it's something that you should ask a child at that age anyway. But she was upset because, you know, she'd grown attached to me and I had grown attached to her. I loved her very much. And she was, you know, she was a great woman. She, you know, very respectful and very respected and, had character and virtuous and all of that. So I went back home to Georgetown. We were living in the rural areas. But before that, some of my memories is that one night I woke up, and because you know it's a rural area, there's no light, no street lights, no lights in the house. You have to put candles or something. So anyway, and found that there was nobody in the house with me. It was just me. So I was scared to death, and I got up out of bed, and I went outside, even though I was scared, but I just sat on the stairs, and I was crying and calling for them because they had a farm, and they had gone to their farm to collect rice and other things that they were planting in the farm. So I think, I don't know how long I sat out there, but I think after a little while, they came back and they were horrified that I'd woken up and I was sleeping and I was sitting out there just crying. So they made amends, they tried to make amends and all of that. But I think something happened then because for a few years after, I I needed to sleep with the light on. I don't know. I was just, I guess, some fear entered into me about being in the dark. But that went after a few years. But it just gave me an insight into what you should do or shouldn't do when you have young children. I mean, very young children with you. But my aunt, she apologized, my great aunt and my uncle, and they never did it again. So that's one good thing. They never did it again. And another um, incident that I thought was significant was that because of the dark, also I really got stung. I put my foot in my shoe, and I got stung by a scorpion. And scorpion can kill you. Scorpions
Mm.
can kill you. Scorpion bite. But I had fever. I was sick for, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, but I got over it. So obviously the Lord had a plan for me, as I've seen being worked out since then. And another key incident that happened to me when I was in that phase of my life was that later on, I don't know, about 3 or 4 years, my great uncle's son came to live with us, and he was like about 19 or something like that, and a bit of a bully. And I remember him. I was sitting on the stairs one day, and he was bringing a bucket of water up the stairs, and he just threw it all over me. And as a result, I developed a fear of water. So to this day, I'm very respectful of the sea, but I don't like to do too much in the sea. So, but that is something, I guess, if you're going to pray for me, you can pray that off for me, because I think it's time that I was able to do more things in the sea and in the water, and not have anything bothering me about it. So anyway, in my first year at university, I think towards the end of the first year, we were in the library discussing the Shakespeare text Othello. And this man that we used to see walking around coming into the campus, he was always walking. And we thought he looked a little bit like Jesus. We used to mock. We used to be quite, children, youth can be quite cruel. So we used to just laugh. But he came up to me and asked me what we were talking about. And so we told him we were doing Othello. I was discussing Othello with my friends and all that. And that was the start of of my relationship with him. And that was in the January. And 4 years later, we were married. So, and I want to pause here to say that we as Christians need to be very careful um, that we marry the right person, that we really checking in with the Lord, that the people that are advising us are giving us good advice, etc. Anyway, we were married and we agreed. The agreement we had was that I would continue and finish and complete my university, and so that I could have a job, because I wasn't used to be sitting at home. I was used to working and having a job myself. So because I was very independent at that time. So the next period is marriage and divorce. So as I said, we were married 4 months after we met, which was amazing. And then because he had been doing, he was a linguist, and he was doing trying to do a PhD looking at the culture and the language remnant of the Ghanaian culture and the Guyanese culture, because the Guyanese culture is very much linked to the Ghanaian culture. We have similar foods. We some of the language from the Ghanaian dialects, maybe Tree or whatever it is in Guyana. And I didn't know at that time that there was a whole big group of Ghanaians who were there in the country speaking their own language and all that. So he introduced me to that. But so we decided that he decided that we would come to England because he needed to find a job. And so we came to England, and visiting America first because my sister was there, my eldest sister was there. So then we came to England, and I got a job, like cleaning, because that was the fastest and easiest thing you could get. And he started looking for a job that was suitable to him. And I think after about 6 months, 6 to 8 months, he got, and we didn't have anywhere to stay. So we were staying with a friend of his here in London. And then he managed to get a job with the British Council teaching English language as a second language overseas. So we got a job in Malawi. And in Malawi, he was working, but I was continuing my education. And there, I was studying. I was looking at what are the differences and the similarities between the literature of the Caribbean and the literature of Africa, focusing specifically on Nigeria. With all those famous writers, Chinua Achebe, and all these kinds of things. So that was a lovely period because um, he had a very nice job. We lived a semi-diplomatic life. I met a lot of people, and we spent 2 years in Malawi. And then after that, I mean, and my impressions of Malawi was that, I was thinking, well, this country, this is Africa, and what the diet that we fed on the television in England is that Africa is poor. But Malawi, when you leave the airport, yes, at that time it was very, very poor, it was very rural, etc. But when we got into Blantyre, it's not the capital, Lilongwe was the capital, went into Blantyre. And, it was amazing. It was like living in England. In fact, these people were richer than some of the British people. So, and I was like, wow, and then we got our own house, which was, massive. We could have strawberries and eat strawberries with cream in front of a fire. I met some very high level Malawians and became friends with the wives. So it was good. It was interesting. And after his contract ended after 2 years, we then we then left there. Well, he left before me, and I spent another couple of months because I had to finish some work there that I was doing at the university. And we came back to England, and within I think 6 weeks or 2 months, he was looking for a job, and he was offered a job in Burma, Myanmar now it's called, and I didn't want to go because for some reason, I think the Lord was really protecting me. I don't know. We heard the stories about some Guyanese woman, and she was Chinese because in Guyana we have 6 different races, and she'd been murdered by her husband, who was a British guy. So I said, no, I'm not going to go because my parents will be worried. They were all in the States, and they'd be worried, and it was too xenophobic. You couldn't get any information, much information in or out of Burma at the time. So he said, okay, we're not going to go there. And then he started looking again. And then a job came up for Mozambique in Southern Africa. And I said, okay, I'll go to Mozambique. But for some reason, I don't know why, to this day, I cannot understand why. I told him, but if we go to Mozambique, I'll divorce you. And that is exactly what happened. So we really have to be careful of the words we speak. Life and death are in the tongue. So anyway, we went to Mozambique, and we were in Maputo, and again, we, living a semi-diplomatic life. He was working well, and I got a job at the international school. As you know, every country, most countries have an international school. So, and that was great because I was able to learn Portuguese and to use it. And I never had any training as such on in learning to speak Portuguese. I just, because I was there in the country, in the environment, I would pick it up. But then I decided to get a teacher just to um, teach me about the structure of the language. So anyway, all of that was fine, and we were working in everything was going fine. We had a lovely house. We had in those countries you have lots of help, so guards and somebody to help in the house and all of that. But that's when I found out that this guy was an alcoholic and that he was an adulterer. I didn't know this all the time because they might send him on short-term contracts for a few months, and he'd go off, and I didn't know what was going on, because I was very innocent. I thought, my plan was that if you get married, it should be, as the Lord says, it should be for eternity. It should be for life. A bit, they say that the marriage is, if you make a promise in your marriage, that's it, life and death. Death until death do us part. So that was my expectation. But I thought afterwards, I thought that this is really a fairy tale. It doesn't work. Then I realized that if the Lord doesn't bring you the bone of your bone and the rib of your rib, then these things will happen. And I wasn't very happy about that. But anyway, I found out, and then I decided to confront him, and I confronted him because the thing that really upset me was that these young Mozambican girls used to be coming to the house, and the guards would try to hide them, but because I was up very early always, I would see them, and so then I would go down and confront them. What do you want? Who are you coming to? And then they would tell me, and so after a while, I decided that the best thing to do was to leave the marital home, because I took me a long time. But then when I made the decision, I knew that I was not going to turn back. Once I'd made the decision, that was it. And because he used to go to they have these clubs where, you call them the Muzungu or whatever you call, would go to drink every night and all of that. And then he would come home drunk and try to be violent. And I wasn't having that. So I used to sleep in a different room. And he would, I'd just leave him to get on with it. And then he told me that he had this woman that he was seeing, and that he loved her. And so I said, okay, I'm going to leave, and you can do what you want. So I left and went to stay. I was at that point in time, I was working for Save the Children USA, which had an office in Maputo, and they were very kind enough to give me a room, and I was staying there. So I was right in the office, and that was fine, and he supported me and took care of me. So that was very good. And I was earning my own money. So even though it was Malawi kwacha, it was, I was able to live on that. So that was good. And then I remember that he came one day to say that he got a letter from my mom, which he'd had for a number of days, and that my young brother, had died in the States, because they had all moved to the States by then, and he died of what is this thing? Something that comes through the vents in the air conditioner. I forgot what you call it. But anyway, he died, and I didn't know, and he'd been dead for a month and buried and all of that. And so, of course, I was like shattered, because I was thinking, I don't know. I walked the streets of Maputo for, a couple of hours that night, and then I booked a flight out for the very next day, and the earliest that I could get, and I left to find out what had happened, and to be there with my family, to grieve my brother, and all of that, and then I went back to Mozambique, packed up my stuff, and left. And I came back to England. Then I went to live in Oxford, and I was studying at the University of Oxford. I was doing my master's of science, and I was focusing on development practices. And at the University of Oxford, I was doing refugee studies. So I did a double degree, but one at one university and another at the University of Oxford. And while I was there, while I was finishing my master's degree, um, I got a call from a friend who I'd met in Mozambique, and she'd had measles or something, and she was like 40 or 40 something during that time. So I didn't know her. I didn't know her from Adam, but I was just like, this is the way I am. So I was helping her. I was sending the maid with soup and stuff like that. So she was very grateful, because she was together with a Malawian, a Mozambican guy, and she'd had a child. And so I don't know if she contracted measles because of that or whatever. But anyway, she was very grateful. So she called me to say that there was a peace, because Mozambique at that time had a civil war. And she called me to say that they were setting up a peace mission in Mozambique. The UN was, and she had put my name forward for a job. with them because I spoke Portuguese at that point in life. So when they called me, I accepted the job, and then I went back to Mozambique a little bit later, and I was there for 3 years. Now, Mozambique, I together all the time I spent there was 7 years. Well, I started off, I thought I would, when I got married, I'd leave. But in fact, I didn't know what was going to happen in terms of marriage. I never thought about leaving the country. I never thought of marrying somebody who was not Guyanese. So it all happened in a very peculiar way. I guess the Lord works in mysterious ways, his wonders to perform, because by marrying this guy and then leaving Guyana, I think from the very beginning, as some of your people, Malika and others picked up, the Lord was really training me to be strong, but also to depend on Him. And so when I left Guyana, I didn't know that I would be coming to England and being here so long and having to learn about England on my own, because when I was here, my husband was in Africa or wherever he was, and I had to find my way. But I've always been a person that was really fairly self-sufficient and being able to get by on things. So that was not a problem. The difficulties came for me when I looked back and reflected on my life was that when I was sick, I contracted a chloroquine malaria in Malawi, and I had to go to South Africa, and I went on my own because he was working, so I was there on my own. Then I got sick again, and I had to come to England. Again, it was all on my own. So all these things, even though I was married in a relationship, I was doing these things on my own. So learning how to maneuver in life, yeah. And after I came back from Afghanistan, I wanted to continue with in some medical way. So the Lord told me when I contracted sarcoidosis, which is this disease that affects the heart and the lungs, He told me to go back to the leaves, go back to Genesis, go back to the leaves, because He's given us the leaves for the healing of the nations. So I started to I used essential oils and make products for people who had one condition or the other, and doing it all from scratch. Yeah. So I was doing all of that. And then when the COVID came, everything just came to a halt. And I haven't restarted it as yet. It wasn't I was just doing it for friends, and people who I knew who were desperate and needed some help. But I didn't have a big business or anything like that. But now I'd like to go back to that and to make it successful. Yes, I remember in fact I had a dream the night before yesterday. It was in the early hours of the morning. I was awake and then I'd gone back to sleep. And I dreamt that myself and my sister, one of my sisters, my youngest sister, who lives in the States, and a little foster child that I had living with me, and somebody else had gone to Guyana. And we were in this house in Guyana. It's not a house that I recognize, but I knew it belonged to us. And then we were the house had different sort of like sections, and we were in one section. We went in late at night and we were sleeping. And then in the morning when we got up, there was a man sleeping in a different section of the room, and I don't know who he was. I went around looking for the police to ask this man to leave. And when I was discussing it with my intercessory group yesterday, somebody asked me if it was an angel. I don't know if it was an angel because it wasn't threatening, but I just felt, well, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And the dream was very technicolor. And when the Lord gives me dreams like that, I've only had about 3 or 4. It's saying something. So I need to ask again, what exactly was that dream about?
Mm.
So that was one. Another one was when I had a friend and he wanted a relationship and I didn't. I was a Nigerian guy, and I remember this, in my bedroom I saw this actual like there was a ladder coming from a long way away, and this man was trying to climb up the ladder, and the bright light woke me up, and I just saw him at the window and pushed him. I wasn't afraid or anything. I just pushed him, and that was the end of that dream. And I figured that it was somebody that I knew who was trying to because people do a lot of stupid things. They think that no one, the God doesn't see them. and I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. So yeah, so I remember that was very technicolor. And then I remember when I got baptized into that wasn't a dream. That was like, I don't know, like Paul said, I don't know whether I was awake or or whatever. But I remember when I got baptized the second time in Oasis Church, that I came home and I was lying on my bed and I was like, because I'd been fasting for the whole week, I felt as though like I wasn't sure whether I was awake or asleep. And I remember that Jesus was sitting on my bed in a royal blue outfit with a band around his waist, and he was speaking to me. And so those are the things that I remember very vividly. I can see clearly what was happening, etc. I think the lessons that I have I identified was that one of the things is you can't always depend and always trust in God to be my protector. Always go to Him and ask Him, is this right? Is this what you want? Is this within your will? Because sometimes I find when you don't do that and you just rush ahead and do things, then when you get into trouble, you go crying to God and He will say, did I tell you to do that? Did you ask me? I mean, he wouldn't say that, but that's how I feel. So that's one of the things I think. And then I thought that one of the scriptures on which I stood was the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, Proverbs. And I love Proverbs as a book, all the wise sayings. So I think always reverence the Lord. Don't take his name in vain. Don't mock him, as so many people do. And that's one of the principles by which I have lived my life. And I think one of the strong lessons that has come out to me, because I told you about the prophecy from the prophetess that I didn't believe, but everything she said actually came true, and it's still being worked out now. And so I think one of the other things lessons is believe in the Lord your God. That's 2 Chronicles 20:20, and believe in his prophets, and so you shall prosper. Yeah. And I think another lesson that I learned was to be always thankful and grateful and always say thank you to the Lord. Yeah. So those are three. And then another thing I think is always never be greedy, never be covetous of what someone else has because you don't know how they got it. And that's always been my principle because my father always told us, mother has, father has, blessed is the child that has its own, and never to envy anybody what they have because you don't know what they did to get it. Yeah. So that's how I live my life. If I see people with money, I want to know where they get it, where they got it from. Is it clean money or how did they do it? So, and I don't have an addictive personality, so I don't care what people have. I mean, I want to have my own, and the Lord has a plan for me. And in the fullness of time, He will deliver what He's got planned for me. And then another thing that I am reflecting on, and that I think has become a principle now, is that you don't jump into relationships because, as the Bible says in Amos 3:3, can two walk together unless they agree? So just make sure that you dig a little deeper to find out what's really. I know people hide things and all of that, but if you go to the Lord, which at the time I was very young, I did ask the Lord, but I didn't ask too many questions. I didn't know how to do the things that I know now, you see. So you can get yourself into a lot of trouble. But then also you need to look at it like, I mean, I was really angry with my parents for having sent me away. But when I reflected backwards, in hindsight, I can see that it was the Lord preparing me for the life that I would have to live, you know. But I was able to discuss with them and they apologized. But I could just see that when you do this to a child, there's all these issues of rejection and anger and stuff that comes up. And I've seen it happen time and time again with various people and in various families. So I can offer some advice for that. I think in the first instance my mother was, and I used to try to evangelize my father because, as I said, he'd never been to church since I knew him, but he used to be a choir boy in the Anglican church. And something must have happened, but he never spoke about it. But he just said, I'm never going to go back into a church. And he never did. All the years of my life, he never did. He's gone home to glory now. But I remember when they were living in the States, when they'd moved to the States, and I was living, I've never lived in the States. I've always lived here since I left Guyana. And I would go there to visit them, and I said to, see them and extend holidays and stuff, and do Thanksgiving ceremonies and stuff like that. But he always used to tell me to go to bed at midnight. And then I'd hear him praying to the Lord. And he'd be repenting for all the things he left undone and all the things he didn't, he's did that he shouldn't have done. And he was one that if you had a problem, he could tell you book, chapter, and verse of the Bible to read. Yet he never went to church. And he always told me that he was going to be with the Lord, not to bother about him. And he did.